Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Herr, willst, schick mit mir, which translates to Lord, deal with me as you wish. And before I forget, there's a G sharp that did not make it into the score there that we'll talk about later. I'm losing my voice a little bit. I don't know why. I hope I'm not sick with anything. I don't feel sick, but my voice is definitely feeling kind of strained. Very interesting chorale. Lots of interesting chord progressions, especially towards the tail end, but little harmonic intricacies throughout, as Bach often does fashion into his chorales. But we're just going to hop into the video because I can anticipate this video being on the longer side. No key signature. We start on C, we end on C. We're in good old C major. Moving things here, I think with the F sharps introduced so early into the texture, actually just this F sharp in particular, but this introduction really does have a G major feel. I think you could make an argument that the first half of this phrase at least is in the key of G major, but I'm going to analyze it all in C because the melody keeps me from taking that stance strictly, but I think there is an argument to be made that this introduction is in the key of G major. But we have G, D, G, and B. That's G major, which is our 5 chord. We have A, C, G, and C. And you could make the argument that that is 6, 7, like an A minor 7 chord, but I think this F sharp is what's more important. We have F sharp, A, and C, which is F sharp diminished. That's 7, 6 of 5, because F sharp's the leading tone to G. So we're just tonicizing G here. G, B, G, and D. It's another 5 chord there with the passing 7th on the bass. We then get E, B, G sharp, and D. That's E7 in root position, another secondary dominant functioning chord. That's 5, 7 of 6 because A is our 6 and E is the dominant of A. We then have A, C, E, and C. That's our 6 chord, which is 6. That's our 6 chord, which is 6. Yes, that's very redundant of me. This F is a non-chord tone. The C is a chord tone, so we don't need to mark it. We then have E, B, G natural. G, B, G, and D, which is G major in root position. That's a 5 chord. And then our imperfect authentic cadence in the key of C major concludes with 1, C, C, G, and E. Our next phrase is also in the key of C major, ends in a perfect authentic cadence. We have B, D, G, and F. That's G7 over B, which is 5, 6, 5. We have C, C, G, and E. That's C major in root position, which is just our good old tonic. And then we have G, B, G, and D again, which is another G major triad. That's our 5 chord. We also have a passing 7th in the tenor there. We have A, C, E, and C. That's A minor in root position, which is our 6 chord. Lots of 1s, 5s, and we've only seen 1, 5, and 6 so far. Actually, we've seen 1, 7 chord. But really only dominant chords, tonic chords, and 6 so far. It's kind of interesting. This E right here is a chord tone, but this G is a passing 7th, so we'll mark it. We then have F, D, F, and B, which is B minor flat 5, B diminished. I guess B minor flat 5 would be an accurate label too. This would be B diminished over F, so we have this suspended almost, or sustained might be a better word, because suspension has a specific definition in music, but we have a 7 chord in second inversion, and then we have some passing tone or some non-chord tones here, a neighbor tone in the melody and a passing tone in the alto before we get F, G, D, and B. And in the past, if you've seen my videos before, we have 7 and 5. When they're linked together, it's very static progression because 2 dominant functioning chords progressing from one to the next. It's a very static sound because they're both functioning the same way. But this is F, G, D, and B, which would be a G7 chord over F, or 5, 4, 2. Whether or not this F really even should be considered as the base of this chord, I guess literally speaking it is the base of this chord, but the fact that it's being sustained over 2 beats doesn't really have the same effect as if it were reiterated over over both beats. The fact that it's tied over means that this 5-4-2 chord, even though the 7th of this chord does resolve down the way that we would expect it, the 7th doesn't really have the same effect because it's being held over from the previous chord. That's the long-winded way of what I was trying to articulate. But regardless, our 5-4-2 chord does resolve the way we expect it to. E, C, G, and C, which is C major in first inversion, which is where we would expect it to go. We get F sharp, C, A, and D. That's D7 over F sharp, which would be another secondary dominant chord. That is 5-6-5 of 5, because D is the dominant of G, and G is our 5, and that resolves where we would expect G major, G, B, G, and D, which is our 5 chord. We also have a passing 7th in the tenor before we cadence on C major, C, G, E, and C, which is our tonic triad. Okay, looking ahead, we have a half cadence in the key of G major, so we're looking for a point on which we modulate, and I don't think we modulate straight away. I think we modulate towards the end of the first system, but I think once this F sharp gets introduced, we have already modulated, so somewhere in this vicinity here. So we start off with another C major chord, C, E, G, and C. No need to reanalyze. We then have B, D, G, and D. That's G major over B, or 5-6. Passing tone in the melody before we get A, C, A, and F. A bit of a deceptive progression here. We would expect 5 to go to 1, but here we have it going to 4. And then it doesn't immediately reverse course and go back to 5 and then to 1 again, which is typically the way we would expect this to outcome, or to result in, I guess, to outcome. An outcome is not a verb. I don't know why I said that. But 5 going to 4-6. We then have G sharp, B, B, and E. Another one of these E major chords, a secondary dominant. This is E over G sharp, which would be 5-6 of 6, because E major is the dominant of A, and A is our submediant. We also have a passing 7th in the melody here before we get A minor, A, E, A, and C, which is 6. However, in the key of G major, I believe that this chord is also functioning like our supertonic, and as we're closing in on our cadence here, we would expect 2 as we could expect 2 as one of the likely candidates for a chord that would occur. And then we have a passing 7th in the bass as well before we get F sharp, D, A, and D. That's D major in first inversion, or 5-6. We have a passing 7th in the melody before we get G, D, A, and G. This A is a 9/8 suspension over the bass, but we know that a tonic triad's being implied here. And then we cadence on D major, D, D, F sharp, and A, which is our dominant in root position. Now here is the penultimate phrase is probably our most interesting phrase. When we have these long runs in the bass, especially when they're chromatic. In this case, not as much like deliberate chromaticism. We do get some chained passing tones, or chained leading tones rather. D sharp to E, F sharp to G. A to B kind of breaks the chain here, but C sharp to D, G sharp to A. When we have chromaticism like this, the chord progressions do tend to veer off of the normative path, and you'll see that Bach uses an unlikely chord to modulate to the key of A minor, which is our destination here. We have an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor, which almost ends up sounding like a deceptive cadence in the key of C major, but that was because the G sharp didn't make it into the score. With the G sharp there, you can't really mistake it as anything other than an authentic cadence of sorts. But here we have D sharp, B, F sharp, and B, which is B major over D sharp. I don't think we have any reason to think that we've modulated at this point, but this would be another 5-6 of 6 chord. But in this case, B is the dominant of E, and E is now our 6 because A has been our 6 for so long now. E is now our 6 because we're in the key of G major, but we're looking to go to the key of A minor. Regardless, this B resolves where it's supposed to. E, B, E, and G. That's our 6 chord. Passing tone in the bass. We get E, B, E, or sorry, G, B, E, and G. That's just taking our 6 chord and putting it in first inversion, so no need to reiterate the Roman numeral, just change the figure bass. And then we get kind of like a passing 7 chord here. A, C, and F sharp, but this G suspended or sustained in the melody here means that we can't really analyze this chord. We can talk about the fact that the chord is there and does bridge the gap between this 6th chord and this tonic triad that happens here, this G major chord, but the G keeps the chord from being entirely intact, or at least voiced and agreed upon in all of the voices, not just 75% of them, but it's there and does smooth the transition from 6 to 1. If 6 to 1 was just a chord progression where we had 6 on one beat and 1 on the next beat, it'd be a very static progression, but this adds a harmonic dynamic to it. But regardless, we do have B, D, G, and D on the next beat, which is our tonic triad, G major and first inversion. And then we move to A minor beyond this point. So I think this G is also functioning like our subtonic in the key of A minor, which is interesting. This is the unlikely chord. We don't often see 7 as a device to modulate as a common chord, but we do see it from time to time. This isn't unprecedented, it's just uncommon, so I don't write it off, but with you have to think a little bit outside of the box or break your maybe go against intuition if you have my relationship with tonality, and that is one that doesn't we don't encounter 7 chords or subtonic 7th chords all that often in comparison to leading tone 7th chords. But when we see them used as a device, as a common chord between keys, it's extra fascinating. Nothing wrong with it, just unusual. We then have C sharp, A, E, and E, which is A major over C sharp. That's another secondary dominant. In this case, that's 5/6 of 4, because A is the dominant of D and D minor is our subdominant in the key of A minor, and that goes where we would expect D, A, D, and F, which is our 4 chord. Now we have passing tone in the melody before we have G sharp, B, E, and D. That's E7 over G sharp, which is 5/6/5. And then we have A minor, A, E, and C, which is our tonic triad. Definitely the most interesting phrase in all of the chorale. Maybe you can make an argument that the second phrase of the A section, or even this sort of G major sound at the beginning of the chorale, makes arguments for those phrases being the most interesting, but I think this has a very fascinating sound, a very interesting profile. So that gets my vote. Okay, last phrase ends in a very typical style, perfect authentic cadence in the key of C, and I think we modulate straight away. This A minor chord, I also think is our submediant in the key of C major. We have B, D, G, and G, which is G major over B. That's a 5/6 chord. We have C, C, G, and E, which is C major in root position. That's a 1 chord. Passing 7th in the bass, we have A, C, F, and F, which is F major over A. That's a 4/6 chord. And then we have 4 voices moving off of the harmonic rhythm. So typically this means that there is a subdivision of the harmonic rhythm here. We have E, B, G, and E. Kind of an interesting subdivision because we have 4 going to 3. One of the most unusual progressions that we see. We don't see it very often. It's kind of deceptive in its own way because we have 4 going to another tonic functioning chord, but not 1, which is where we would expect it to go. Or 5, kind of deceptive in the way that 4 is going to 5 in the bass, and 3 and 5 are mostly the same chord, but the absence of D versus E, which is the root of the E minor chord, is what has that deceptive effect. Then we have F, A, and D, which is D minor over F. That is a 2/6 chord, and as you can see, Bach has started a chain of adjacent harmonies. We have 4 going to 3, going 2, and it does not stop here. We have D, A, F, and D happening on the or off the harmonic rhythm again, or maybe we can say the harmonic rhythm has now been regularly subdivided into 8th notes because it continues until the end of the phrase. So this doubled harmonic rhythm has sort of hijacked the normal harmonic rhythm we would expect in a common time chorale, which is 1 chord introduced every beat for the most part, or even if it's not a new chord, it's just a chord is more or less voiced on every beat, usually speaking. But then we have D, A, F, and D, like I just said. That's just taking the D major chord and putting it in root position. We then have E, E, G, and D. That's E minor 7, incomplete, but still in a 3 chord, a 3/7 more specifically. So we have 4, 3, 2, going to 3. We have some more passing tones going on here in 3 of the voices. We have F, we have E, we have A, and we have C. And this is another instance of adjacent harmony. This is F major 7 in root position. That's a 4/7 chord. And then we have G, D, G, and B, continuing this theme of adjacent harmony. That is a 5 chord G major with a passing 7th in the bass. And unfortunately, the adjacent harmony doesn't continue. This string of adjacent harmonies is the longest that we've encountered so far in the chorales. It's very fascinating, has a very interesting profile, but as we close in on the rest of the chorale, we're just looking at cadential chords here. So we have E, C, G, and C. That's another C major triad in first inversion. The C kind of puts the chord in root position, but getting rid of the third, I don't think it's worth analyzing because of that, but it's still a chord tone, so we're not going to mark it. We then have G, C, G, and D. The C is a 4/3 suspension over the bass, which means that a 5 chord's being implied. And then we get the resolution on the next beat, G, B, G, and D, with a late passing 7th going on here after beat 4. And then we cadence on C major, C, G, E, and C, which is our tonic triad. And that concludes today's analysis. A very fascinating chorale. Definitely some shaky or I don't want to use the word shaky to undermine my own analysis. I'm confident that that all of the analysis that I've done in all of my videos is valid in its own way. Just some of it is stronger than others because a lot of the analysis that I do is not refutable, just because of the fact that we're looking at chords that can only be interpreted in one way using this particular set of harmonic vocabulary. But there are some, aspects of the analysis that are a little bit more ambiguous, and I talk more at length about them because of it. Like the beginning of the chorale, is it in the key of G major? Is it in the key of C major? I think that's ultimately up for you to decide. I think that both analyses could be correct. I committed to C because the melody is much more C-like and kind of conflicts with the harmony, but the harmony makes a very strong G major presence with that F sharp there. I think both analyses would be accurate. Whether or not we modulate over this G major chord rather than something else is something another point of contention as well, or a point that there could be some debate. Anyways, I think I've talked at length about the fact that some of the analysis is a little bit ambiguous, and that's okay because that's what a lot about what makes analysis fun for me. It makes it fun to talk about. But if you're interested in following me along on this journey to analyze all of the chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification icon. You'll be notified of when my daily upload goes live. And if you want your daily fix of Bach or a daily dose of analysis, or both, you are in the right place, and I would love to have you along for the journey. But on that note, again, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.